We did it, my friends. Fantasy hockey and the NHL is set to return, and we hit the Atlantic Division for our final stop on our team-by-team preview. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Buckle up, and here we go, fantasy fanatics. The 2025-26 NHL campaign returns this week, my friends. It's Tuesday coming up on the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're coming in red hot with the Atlantic Division preview, 8-1 updated odds, and every single fantasy angle that you need. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, where right now, new customers that bet $5 and win get $300 back in bonus bets. Mr. Roden, it's an early episode special, 8-1 in our favorite division, if you will, but also perhaps the spiciest. Lots of fantasy value to be had. Let's start at the 8 spot. I'm going to pull up these odds. Boston Bruins, I think we both feel good here in the 8 spot.
I actually have the Buffalo Sabres at the 8 spot.
Oh.
Look, I think when you compare these two teams, the goaltending is a little bit better in Boston. I think the blue line's a lot better in Boston as well. Outside of Rasmus Dahlin, I think this Sabres organization has bet on a lot of guys that just haven't panned out yet. Bowen Byram, Owen Power, Samuelson as well in the mix. You've got Connor Timmins and Ryan Johnson as your third D pairing. Outside of Rasmus Dahlin, who I want to talk about for Tuesday's episode when we do bold predictions. The blue line's pretty abysmal, and with the goaltending situation as well between UPL, who played really bad last season. You bring in a guy like Alexander Gorgiev, who struggled the last couple of seasons. Alex Lyon has been on multiple teams. Devin Levi is not quite there yet to the level you would expect him to be, in competition at the NHL level. Goaltending's been a situation. Outside of Rasmus Dahlin, the blue line's been a situation. The forward group, the top 6, to me is very dangerous. You already spoke about Josh Norris when we did our sleeper picks. I'm an absolute huge fan of Tage Thompson. I think he can always be in consideration for the Rocket Richard with his goal-scoring touch. Alex Tuch, I think, is a very underrated piece that goes overlooked in fantasy hockey drafts. With all of that being said, I still believe the Buffalo Sabres will finish last in the Atlantic Division because this is the toughest division. There's a lot of teams that could make the playoffs, and I still think the Buffalo Sabres are quite a bit away from being even a contender.
When it comes down to fantasy, you and I like to throw out the term fantasy goldmine. I would say with this Boston Bruins, it's kind of like a fantasy pit. I really don't feel good telling anyone to invest in anyone outside of David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman on the 0G side of things. After those three, it gets kind of dicey. I know you like Morgan Geekie. The Bruins, for me, are going to really struggle to score goals this season. And for that reason alone, I'm going to put them a little bit lower than the Buffalo Sabres. So it's 8-7 for me. We'll flip-flop them. But when you look at the stats from last season, 222 goals for the Boston Bruins. Flames, Ducks, Preds, and Sharks are the only 4 teams to outscore them. You look at the lines, and I really just don't know where they're going to generate offense from. Steele up the middle, Lindholm, Middlestat, Fraser, Minton. That is a huge weakness for this team. That's clear. I will say this too. The Buffalo Sabres finished 10th in the NHL in goals for, and I know not everything is just goals for, but very simply in this division loaded with offensive talent, I just don't see it for the Boston Bruins at all. They come in at 8, Sabres come in at 7. Very interesting that you're mentioning some pieces in Buffalo that just haven't panned out. That's definitely an angle to consider. And then you look at what Boston did in the offseason or just at the end of last season. Arvidsson comes in, Tanner Jeannot's in the mix now. I don't really see it for their new guys as well, Steele. So it's going to be a tough season, I think, for both of these clubs. I look up the standings a little bit, and we get into these other clubs like the Red Wings, the Senators, the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah. These are a chunk of teams that I think are kind of very close together. I've got the Detroit Red Wings here at 7. I'll turn it back over to you for your take on your 7th spot.
So you have the Buffalo Sabres above Detroit?
No, I have Bruins at 8, Sabres at 7, and I've got the Red Wings at 6. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. You said
7th spot.
Sabres
My
at
bad.
7.
My bad.
Red Wings I also have at 6, and they haven't made a ton of changes. Like they've had a few different pieces here and there, and not so like in the off season really is more just some prospects, some young guys making the lineup this year. Moritz Seider, I compare in the same sort of breath as a guy like Mackenzie Weegar. I think he's good for 40, 50 points. He fills out all those peripherals, 200 over 150 shots, 200 blocks, 200 hits, penalty minutes. I think we're still waiting for that breakout season. It just quite hasn't come yet. Sort of in the same breath of what I've been saying about Andrei Svechnikov. I've just been waiting for him to get back there. Year after year, he just has been in that same consistent level, hasn't taken that extra step. So I think Moritz Seider can be a very big factor this year. I think a guy like Lucas Raymond could have a really big season because he played phenomenally last year. His ability to create in the offensive zone, his ability to be aware of every single situation, where his teammates are, where where the man on man is, the opponents, everything. 80 points in 82 games last year. A career high for Lucas Raymond, 192 shots. I think he can even elevate his game even further. Dylan Larkin, if he continues to stay healthy, he was really good as well. 82 games, 70 points, right there along with Alex DeBrincat, 30 goals, 40 assists. So they have a lot of dangerous weapons. I just, we kind of talked about it in the offseason when we did the top 5 for Detroit, that Steve Yzerman just hasn't, the plan hasn't come to fruition. The plan has been in the works for, it feels like generations now, decades. And when are we going to get the Detroit Red Wings of the early 2000s? Like, that's what I want again. Original 6, all this stuff. Steve Yzerman plan hasn't hit yet. But they still have some good pieces here, so I have them at number 6.
John Gibson comes in the cage to try and shore up that position. Cam Talbot, that's a
very
veteran, steady tandem. And I think there's some nice fantasy value there to be had as well. This team finished 4th in the NHL last year with the 4th best power play, clicking at over 27%. So when you look at a guy like Patrick Kane and you've got those categorical leagues with power play points, this is a team to look at. We've highlighted Marco Kasper as a very good sleeper. You mentioned the progression of Lucas Raymond. The weakness to me on this team, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Ben Sherratt, Simon Edvinsson, and I know Edvinson's got a nice little bit of upside here as a young blue liner. The blue line here to me is the Achilles heel of this club, and that can mean really bad things for a veteran tandem goaltender if they don't figure it out. We will figure it out the rest of today's episode, I promise. I've got odds up here, Mr. Roden, and now that we get into the meat and potatoes of this division, might be time for a sprinkle or two. Make sure you guys stay tapped into Tuesday's episode. Bold predictions, hockey's back, nightly bets, we've got you covered. Monday waiver wire. We're here to make sure you guys are building that winner. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. 401ks, properties, investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you end up leaving money on the table. At Monarch Money, it's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings you entire financials in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, so if you've been putting off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, and you can get all your accounts linked in minutes. See clear data visuals, smart categorization of your spending. Finally, feel in control of your money even without touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. Flip, this one kind of pained me to do. It was difficult to it was difficult to place this team at the 5th position in the Atlantic Division. However, it had to be done in my honest opinion. And I have the Florida Panthers at number 5.
Whoa.
I have the Florida Panthers at number 5. I have them missing the playoffs. And
wow.
And
okay.
I know it's a bold take, so maybe
That
I
is a
could have
bold take.
saved this. I could have saved this for Tuesday's episode, but
You can
I
double
just
down.
think, yeah, I could double down.
Yeah.
But I just think when you hear, when you look back at the words from Paul Maurice, a week ago after the Barkov injury, it's like you can't replace him. That is not a player that can just be easily replaced. Even though
Totally.
they're going to try to do it with Bennett, they're going to try to do it with Lundell and whatnot. You're also without Matthew Tkachuk for half the season. Those are two very vital, important pieces
No
to the
doubt.
success of this club. And again, this is a team effort. I mean, Paul Maurice has got this team down pat, working like a well-oiled machine. But in this case, just because of how dangerous, how good these Atlantic Division teams are now, I really expect Montreal to be there once again. I expect Ottawa to take that next step in their kind of development as a franchise over the last 4 years or 5 years of this rebuild. I have the Florida Panthers being in 5th because of the significant losses to their stars, Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk, who have just been so significant to this team's success. I think it's going to come. I think it's going to be really close by the end of the regular season. However, the Florida Panthers will be on the outside.
I think of everything you just said, I got to wholeheartedly agree with how tight the 5 through 1 spots are realistically going to be here in this division this year. Because now, as much as I know you're putting Florida at 5, and I don't know if I agree with that fully, they are going to be almost plug and play, I think, 1 through 5. But this makes for a good conversation here because I have the Montreal Canadiens at 5, and I understand you're fired up about them totally. I guess I still see Verhaeghe, Bennett, Reinhart, Brad Marchand, 4 really good forward fantasy options and 4 good forwards. Forsling, Ekblad, Mikkola, Seth Jones, one of the most balanced top 4 D-men cores in the entire NHL. And I know Bob's aging, but it's still Bob. So to me, they've got to be higher in this division. The Montreal Canadiens are a very sexy team. And this isn't about them necessarily being the 5th best team in this division. It's more so of what I buy into in the teams ahead of them. Look, Ivan Demidov, it's really sexy. Zach Bolduc, I loved the addition. He's a bit banged up. Patrick Laine, these are all really good options. And when you look at what they have up front and what they've been able to see from Sam Montembeault and the addition of Dobson, all of it, we've covered it. To me, a rookie out of Russia is still risky. Patrick Laine, who is so injury prone, risky. Zach Bolduc, 1 good year under his belt. There is a lot that could potentially, I don't want to say go wrong because this team's better than that, but there's a lot of things that might not work out to their full potential. So I put them in here at 5, Steel. They obviously had a stepping out season last year. They actually finished the year last year with points 9 out of their last 10. So they're kind of showing that progression. Clutch time comes, they're ready to go. So I would say this. For me, I separate fantasy here. There is so much to love about this team. You've covered that at length. We're good to go here. They come in at 5. There's going to be good teams left on the outside looking in. I will throw this back to you. Yep. Montreal Canadiens on the FanDuel board come in with the 5th longest odds for the division. So not like that means I'm right here, but plus 1,200 on the odd board. Sabres at plus 2,200. Then Red Wings at plus 35 and Bruins at plus 55. Back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I look at these two teams, and just based on last year in the standings as well, there was only 7 points that separated them from 5th in the Atlantic to 3rd in the Atlantic. 7 points, that was it. So the fact that I believe Montreal even got better from what we saw last year, I do believe Florida has got just a little bit worse because of these significant injuries. Again, such a well-oiled machine. Bill Zito's got it pat down. Paul Maurice got a pat down. Sergei Bobrovsky continuing to do his thing. 7-point difference. Sure. 2 significant players lost. Yep. It's going to be close. I have it very close. That's why I have Montreal at 4. Okay. You already spoke about it. Noah Dobson in the mix. I think Sam Montembeault is on the cusp of having a really good season as well. Demidov into the mix. Could be a 60-point player. Nick Suzuki leads the way. All of that said and done. I'm not going to get into it for the Montreal Canadiens. I want to go straight to the 3rd team in the Atlantic Division, the Ottawa Senators. They have been taking step after step after step in the right direction. And finally, everything is coming to fruition. Everything is coming together at once here. And the team, the city, the fans, they're becoming whole. They're getting a little bit cocky getting a little bit cocky, maybe settle
It's
down,
okay.
be a little bit more humble, but they are a very good team nonetheless. Ottawa Senators come in third in this Atlantic division. Brady Tkachuk is an absolute unicorn out there. He does everything, especially when we're talking about it fantasy-wise. This is a player that I know over the last 2 years, let me just quickly pull this up, over the last 2 years has been a little bit not so much focused on the not that he's not focused, but has seen a little bit of a regression offensively. Had a career high 83 points back in 2022-23 season, dropped down to 74 points, dropped down to 55 points last year. This is a player that I think can be very consistent and can live up in that 75, 80 point on a year-to-year basis.
I totally
Obviously,
agree.
a little bit of a regression. However, 75, 80 points, over 300 shots, over 200 hits. This guy really, over 120 penalty minutes. He is a fantasy GM's dream. He just does it all. And that's why he's a first round pick. That is why he's a top 10 pick, especially in categorical formats. I love this player. I think when you get into the mix as well with Tim Stutzla and him just elevating his game, constant diving of what he does to good on him to create those power plays and man advantage for his team. Dylan Cousins in the mix, who can also throw his weight around. Drake Batherson, you absolutely love. Shane Pinto.
I do.
Finally, hopefully we can see some consistency from him. Jake Sanderson is an absolute stud. Linus Allmark, a winning Vezina Trophy goalie. They come in third for me.
This team is the real deal. And I look at a second line of Dylan right now anyway, of Dylan Cousins, David Perron, and Drake Batherson. And thank you for alluding to my boy Drizzy Drake. And that's who I wanted to just talk about quickly, because all the attention goes to the bigger guns on this team. And for good reason. Jake Sanderson has established himself as one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Let's see what that does for his fantasy value this year, Steele. Very intrigued to see if he can put up the numbers that we're expecting him to. Drake Batherson, what you can expect out of him, 25 to 30 goals, 65 to 70 points, and he's establishing himself with a bit of a sandpaper edge. Last year, 149 hits, 30 penalty minutes, and nearly 200 shots. I don't need to describe to you how important those statistics can be to your team when you're also going to get around 70 points from this guy, Steele. On the power play, he looks really good working along that wall. I really like what they have. When you're on a power play unit with Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stutzla, Jake Sanderson, and now they're mixing in Dylan Cousins, Steele, that is very, very attractive. Yep. This team is going to be a very big handful on the offensive side. Let's see how they do in crunch time. They took the step in the postseason. They showed the Leafs that they can hang. They won a couple of games, made it interesting. They come in at the 4th spot for me. However, I wouldn't be surprised if they finish higher. You and I have been waiting for it, Steele. Last year it happened. Could even be better this season.
It really could. That's why I have them top 3 in the Atlantic. But the top 5 teams, like you said, it is going to come down to the wire. This is a very dangerous, very elite group in the Atlantic Division, outside of the Buffalo Sabres and Boston Bruins, of course. But the top 5 are getting after it, and we're getting after it after the break as well. Top 2 teams in the Atlantic. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We love using FanDuel. It gives us so many ways to play, building parlays, tried player props, even followed the live lines during the game. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download FanDuel app today and get started. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button. Leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden. Flip, over to you, my friend. I assume because you have the Ottawa Senators, at 4, that you probably have the Florida Panthers at 3, unless you have them even higher on this list.
I have, look, before, because we did all of these lists a couple of weeks ago anyway, in preparation for doing it this week. I would have had them at 2. You mentioned the Barkov angle. Rip to the fantasy teams who had Sasha Barkov drafted really high. Number 1, that's going to be hard to replace.
Tough.
I had to swap them out. I had to put them down at 3. The Maple Leafs come in at 2, and Tampa's number 1. I'm excited to talk about Tampa because this team is the truth. And I mentioned why I think the Florida Panthers are still going to be a top 3 club in this league, in this division, sorry. It's the blue line, it's Bob, and it's what Paul Maurice will be able to get out of players like Lundell, even the Luosterainens of the world. They're going to step their game up, and they're going to be fine. I hear what you're saying because of how close it all is. We've covered it. Panthers come in at 3 for me. We've talked about them. Let me talk about the Leafs quickly for me at 2. This all runs through 34, and I know you and I have had our disagreements here, and I totally get what you're saying. For me, now, this year, more than ever, especially, we know with number 16 not there next to him, 34 has to lead the charge, and I don't necessarily always mean with 3 or 4 points every night, but he has to be a difference maker. You and I have spoken about his peripherals going up, block shots and hits, almost right there around 100 for both every year now is what you can expect. That two-way game that he's been developing, he needs to be a difference maker. Face-off dot, back checking, all of it, Steele. It runs through 34 with me. And at the end of the day, we don't need to talk about the goaltending because I think we've covered that angle. For me, it comes down to 34. I think there's a ton of fantasy value in this guy in those 6th, 7th, 8th spots that he's been going in drafts. I see a big year for 34, but he's got to get it going early. The Leafs should be a top 2 team in this division, in my opinion. I wouldn't even hate on you if you've got them there at 1. They're still got a really good blue line. They come in at 2 for me, Florida at 3. That's my take on it because Tampa is the toast of the division, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Toronto is top 2, but they're not 2. They are number 1, and I'll talk about that in a second, or I'll talk about it right now. I have them at number 1, and obviously, it's tough when you lose a player of Mitch Marner's caliber. But I do believe this team, not that they've gotten better, but they've gotten more whole. Like I always go back to that comment from Austin Matthews about getting rid of the passengers and, kind of seeing this NHL face-off Amazon videos come out for the season. They're 2. You're seeing some snippets there. Mm-hmm. The way I viewed Mitch Marner, again, such a talented player, such an incredible creative mind to be able to do the things that he did, not just in the offensive zone, breakouts, the passes that he's able to make. And we've already seen that in the preseason with Vegas. Mm-hmm. I just think as a group, as a whole, he would kind of disappear at times, and he would kind of just start blaming other guys in the dressing room. It wasn't his fault. You never saw him take accountability. I think you start to see that now this year with these pieces that they've got in the offseason. Joshua, Nicholas Roy, guys like Austin Matthews stepping up, William Nylander being a leader for once as well. You love to see it from these caliber of players. I believe the team's whole. This is also Craig Berube's second season coaching this club, and he doesn't have to deal with the core four anymore. Right. You got Anthony Stolarz and James Reimer in the crease right now, which the vibes will be high at Scotiabank Arena. You know how long it's been since I've been this excited? James Reimer, Optimus Rhyme in the cage in a Leafs uniform. This is incredible. Anyways, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Yeah. I think this is, again, it's going to be very close. I just think, again, I do tend to agree with you that a lot of it does depend on Austin Matthews. He does need to be the guy, but it doesn't have to mean 3-4 points every single night. It just means, what are you doing in the defensive zone? What are you doing physically? How are you leading the group out there on a nightly basis? That's how I view it. That's why I have them at number 1, Tampa Bay Lightning at number 2. Look, it's going to be very close. I have pretty much identical to how they finished last year. Leafs finished last year 1, Lightning 2, Florida was 3. I just kind of moved them down to 5, move everybody up 1 spot, and that's how I view this Atlantic division.
Tampa Bay Lightning come in at plus 195 on FanDuel to win the division. Second shortest odds, Maple Leafs at plus 290 and the Panthers at plus 330. I'll leave it at this with the Tampa Bay Lightning. That Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli duo up the middle as their top 2 centers is nearly unrivaled in terms of balance and skill in this entire NHL. Gensel, Point, and Kucherov on the top line. Unparalleled, I would say, for the most part, in terms of the most talented. Victor Hedman holds down a blue line that, other than that, could be a concern steal. But when you got Vasilevsky returning to form and looking like top 2 or 3 at the worst fantasy goaltending option, and then you dig into the numbers that this Tampa Bay team had last year, second best goal differential in the entire NHL, best in the Eastern Conference at plus 75, and they led the entire NHL in goals for with 292. This team will return to the top of the table, in my opinion, and be a problem. John Cooper, one of the best in the business.
Yep.
It's not a fluke steal that the Florida teams have the 2 best coaches arguably in the business and have repeated success. And I mean banners in the rafters. We hope we do the same for your fantasy team. Bold predictions tomorrow and big time bets returning, my friend. Let's get after it.
NHL season opener, triple header, Florida Panthers, Chicago Blackhawks. You're staying tuned in and locked in Tuesday, September 7th, October 7th, not September.
Yeah, you're close
enough. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Peace.